Round two.
Round two, the doubleheader of the day for the Military Retirement Podcast. Awesome.
Yeah. Closing out the year with a bang, bringing out all the stops. I just
Why
noticed
not?
on the intro screen, I got to change that logo again since I changed the logo. Since you know how I hate rebranding, but
Oh yeah, there you go. So we got to start it fresh for the new year. So
that's
what
right.
is the new logo? What does that say?
Just added transition to the bottom. So military retirement and transition doesn't say podcast anymore on it. I mean, I'm pretty
Okay.
sure everybody knows we're a podcast by now, but I think the transition's a little bit more inclusive and
Mhm.
trying to be more inclusive in the coming year and try to make it not as obvious that we're just talking about retirement stuff because we're not. We're talking about all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, John, I wanted to bring up something that I we talked about it offline a little bit. It was
Yep.
funny to me, and it just kind of shows you how uh, both the power of going forth and communication and communicating with folks and the I lack the words, but the dumbassery of skipping the chain of command, I suppose, right? Let me add this to the stage here. So this is something I found on Facebook just now, right before we were talking. This Marine, and I don't know how true this thing is, how real, but this Marine says we are officially at 2 months past when I was supposed to receive my reenlistment bonus from Manpower, LMAO. And he directed that on X, formerly Twitter, to the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps. And Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, as a professional that he is, I understand frustration, and we never want to lose faith with our Marines. I am aware of the backlog of bonuses, and I can assure you we are working through them as fast as we can while we navigate the CR. CR, I assume, is career retention. I don't know.
Continuing resolution, I think.
Maybe continuing resolution. Yeah. So,
Budget
and then
constraints makes sense.
yeah, and he follows on to say, send me an email/DM with your reenlistment details, and I will look into your bonus. We all are accountable. Semper Fi. Very cool. However, once this guy sends the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps his information about the reenlistment details, I can imagine that every Sergeant Major in the Marine Corps is going to be telling this guy, I want to see you in my office
Right.
ASAP. Right.
It's a
So
trap.
yeah, it is. It's a trap. There was a similar situation when I was a young Marine, and where I think I told you, John, where I think it was like a young Lance Corporal or a corporal in the Marine Corps. He had emailed the commandant of the Marine Corps, because you can easily find these people on Global, right, on the GAL,
Yep.
and on the email list. So he emailed him directly. I forgot what kind of question he asked him, and the commandant, I forgot who it was. It was Amos, or I can't remember who the commandant was at the time, but he responded saying, Marine, I'm currently on leave on a fishing trip. Please utilize your chain of command. And he had several sergeants major and generals on the CC line. So you can imagine the storm that happened after that. That's hilarious. So yeah, don't skip the chain of command. Utilize your chain of command. But I guess if you're not getting answers, this is one way to get answers, right? But
That's one way.
hilarious nonetheless.
Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, Reddit. There's all kinds of ways you can navigate the communications channels, but just be careful. Be careful what you say.
Oh yeah, and if you do that, just be aware of the repercussions and be ready for that stuff. If you
Right.
really don't care, then whatever, more power to you.
Enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we do have one more guest to close out this year, 2024. Been a great year. The episode we just recorded 2 hours ago, we went and gave flowers to a bunch of folks, and this is one more person we can add to that list of people who we want to give flowers to. Daniel
Oh yeah.
is a guy that I met out at the MIC when I was out at the Military Influencer Conference, and he was kind of my chaperone of sorts. He's very experienced with the Military Influencer Conference and knows a lot of people
Mhm.
there. He's very outgoing. He's very conversational. His kind of superpower is introducing people to other people and making connections with people. So yeah, we hit it off. I've been on his show as well on YouTube. You can check him out if you check out his LinkedIn, and we'll put links and stuff in there. But yeah, just want to bring Daniel Faust up to the show.
Let's do it.
Hello, hello.
Hey, welcome to the
Hey.
show, Daniel.
Thanks for letting me go on. And yeah, I want to give a little comment about that. Yeah, I remember those days when people didn't do the chain of like the internet and go tag people and everything else. But man, it's amazing that the cojones people have nowadays to go
It is.
over and tag those people. If that was me, I would have been done and over with in that particular regard. So I at least give people the kudos. They have the cojones to tag their sergeant majors and chief
Yeah.
master sergeants and say, hey, this, whatever. But I'm like, the CR was the continuing resolution amendment that
That's
just got approved December 20th last
Mhm.
second. So hopefully that Marine gets his money soon, because money will be stretched out until March 14th. So hopefully he can get it before then.
Yeah. I think the whole social media thing makes everybody so accessible. And by the way, I like your see-through bottle. Can you just hold that up again? What the
Yes,
hell did I
yes.
just see?
It's
That's
a
awesome.
cloaking device.
I do
It's a
it
cloaking
purposely
device.
that way, just to go over and to get views. We're streaming live on my page too, so they'll be like, "What's that?"
Oh, right on, right on.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, everything's so easily accessible on social media, right? It just makes it feel like so freeing. Hey, let me just tag the sergeant major. Let me just email this guy or whatever. It's so easily accessible. I think that's what it is.
Yep, could have so used that 12 to 13 years ago when I was getting out of active duty.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So speaking of active duty, I just want to kind of, this is going to be a semi-traditional interview for us because you are getting close to your retirement age for the reserves, the gray area retirement. But you did serve on active duty, and I want to just hit at least the bookends of your career, so we can just go off from there. But like the impetus, like what was the kind of the guiding light, the magical thing that happened that lit up in the sky that allowed you to raise your right hand and join the service? And could you place us in a place and time where that happened?
Yeah, it's going to be kind of funny, but we'll go with it. So initially, I got called from the recruiter at my house, and he's like, "Hey, do you want to come into the service? This is the Air Force recruiter." And I said, "No, I've already told the Army I didn't want to die." That was just my joke back then, back in the 2000s. And he's like, "Yeah, this girl that's in your high school class needs a ride. Can you pick her up?" And I had a crush on her since 9th grade. So I'm like, I can tell her how I feel. So I pick her up to go to the recruiter. I had no intention of going in, by the way. And I basically tell her, like, hey, I like you. And she's like, oh, I have a boyfriend. So I felt like my heart got ripped out of my chest, and I'm still having to drive to the recruiter. Maybe I should have waited until the end. So at least it would have been more painful. So we get into the recruiter's office. She gets more not interested into the military. I get more interested. We almost switch spots because at first she's sitting at the desk. And then as the interview with the recruiter goes, I started swapping and moving forward. And then as she's standing in the back, and she said something like, oh, if I go in the military and I'm with my boyfriend, he's going to leave me. And God gave me this word, and I don't know how, because I wasn't even a Christian then. And I said, it doesn't matter the distance or anything else. You can keep a relationship. I wasn't even a Christian then. And I was like, it doesn't make sense that the distance goes over and does that. You don't have to cheat or not keep a relationship just because you have distance. Well, self-fulfillment prophecy later that she basically went to the Navy and then she did get a divorce. It's almost like she was calling it. And I got more interested in the recruiter. So I didn't go in for the most, ethical, moral, like, hey, I want to really serve my country. I went in because they had free food, they had a job, and it was because of a girl I initially sworn in. The values did change over 25 years, but that was the initial reason why I went in. And I told my dad, and he was pissed. I said, I'm only going in for 2,197 days. He's like, shut up. Because I'm a math guy. I counted how many days I had for that 6-year enlistment plus leap years. And I was like, okay. But so then I went in October of 2000. And that's how the whole Air Force journey got started, at least with active duty.
And then at what point did you decide to come off of active duty? Like, what was the big kick for that? What was going on?
I wish it was a choice. I at least had more of a choice coming in than compared to going out. So I've cross-trained into many different MOSs or AFSCs, rates, whatever your branch understands of service. So I was in like my third AFSC at that point, and I went from a admin HR AFSC to mental health. So there's certain requirements in that job. and I could pass academically, but I couldn't understand all the soft skills. Either I would be super soft and moldable with the client and not get the paperwork done because I was so focused on the client, or I would go over and get all the paperwork done and be cold as ice. So they wanted me to balance both. They train you in that AFSC for 3 months, but yet doctors go to school for decades. So it's kind of interesting. I'm doing the same job as the doc's doing. So when I got down to the deployment, they're like, oh, we just want you to do the admin work, go brief people, connect with people, and be customer service. I said, that's my jam. Fine. 6 weeks go by, person leaves, get a new doc, and the doc's like, we're doing patient care. We're increasing our patient load 300%, and you're going to counsel the patients. Excuse me? Like, so I went from paperwork briefing dude to now doing full out clinical work. And they're like, well, you don't get this. And I said, I haven't got this in a long time. And I keep telling people, and they keep forcing me. So then they sent me home early because I didn't get the AFSC on a deployment. So I get home sent early. They said, hey, we're trying to get back to you to your old job. My old job wanted me, but there's a thing called the Air Force Enlisted Classification Directory. That is the thing that manages every AFSC. And since I wasn't mentally retarded, and since I didn't have a speech impediment, they couldn't kick me out. So they gave me a 1 EPR, which is like the lowest of the low. And that triggered me to get out of active duty. So that I didn't leave on per choice. They didn't want me to stay in the AFSC because if I re-enlisted, I get a $90,000 bonus. So if they don't trust the guy going over and doing the job on the deployment, even though at home station, we don't do counseling. Home station, we're just like checking patients in, doing blood pressure, going over and helping the docs do stuff on the back end, all the admin stuff, the IT stuff. Back at deployment, it depends on what your doc wants. So your doc wants you to be multifaceted when you're at deployment. So it's like, you're going to counsel patients or you're going to brief people. We want you to be everything. So I had to leave active duty, and it was God's providence that I lived near a reserve recruiter, like literally across the street. I talked to him on a regular basis, but I didn't know he was a reserve recruiter. And he's like, I told him, I said, hey, I'm leaving. I'm getting on active duty. He's like, what? What happened? He's like, I told him a scenario. He's like, you know, you can go into the reserve. And I said, oh, I didn't know that part. So the second my active duty enlistment ended, I went to the recruiter like 3 days later because my enlistment ended July 1st of 2012. I waited until about the 5th or 6th of July because nobody works on the 4th of July. And I went in that Monday and I'm like, hey, I've only been on 5 days. I heard I can come back in the reserve. And it was providential because the regulation was changing. So I got in back in August 23rd of 2012. And then as of 30 September, they didn't allow me to come in because they were going to deny me. It wasn't a waivable thing. So they got rid of waivers of all like denial of enlistment. So I came in with 5 weeks to spare, and then now I've been doing reserve ever since.
Yeah, it's beautiful the way fate kind of crosses our paths multiple times in multiple ways and sets things up that you don't expect. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And then as far as your time now getting ready to get to a retirement point, or at least one retirement point in your career, how much time you got left and what's kind of on your mind up until that point?
It's 293 days. I do a daily retirement journey blog on my Facebook. I'll do it later today and everything else. And it's been a surreal journey. So I clicked on the paperwork 18 October of this year for 18 October next year. So that's why it's 293 days. And each day has been interesting on the reflections and what to think about. And I don't think people holistically talk about the retirement journey. I think you guys do, but there's very few that talk about it mentally, emotionally, spiritually, relationally, practically. What is it going to look like with your wife or husband? What is it going to look like with your kids? What is it going to look like with the people you're currently connected with? Are you moving from one location to another? What does that look like? How does your church family or, faith family go over and look at things? How are you going to go process this thing, and how are you going to transform? So it's been very interesting. I also say that I think there's more active duty coverage compared to guard and reserve coverage because they think it's easier, but it depends on the type of reserve or guard life that you have. So for me, I did 7 years as a traditional reservist, and I've done roughly 6 years as a air reserve technician, full-time person. So during the week, GS9 employee wearing the uniform, doing the same job, and then the weekend comes over and you're a tech sergeant and you're married to both of them. So as long as you're military, you can be civilian. But once you divorce one, the other one goes away. So if you divorce your retirement on the reserve side, boom, then your civilian job goes away. If you take away the civilian job, then your traditional reserve job goes away. So you're breaking them both at the same time. So it's very interesting. I'm going to be 43, almost 44 years old when I'm retired, but I won't receive the funds until I'm 58 and a half. And now my civilian job in 293 days goes away also. So I've been trying to share that part of the journey, figure those steps out. Medical is a horror show in that particular regard. They don't give really much guidance on that. So I would say it's been a blessing, but luckily I'm very much a planner. So I write out my plans and then we pray about it. And then every 90 days reevaluate and get wisdom. So any wisdom I can get here from anybody that's done it before, like especially as a traditional reservist or an art, I would love to go over and to learn. But I'd say it's a very interesting journey from all different perspectives. The only thing that is solid is you know what day you're leaving.
Mm-hmm. And what is your plan after? I don't know if you covered that already. What's your plan after after everything is said and done?
So this is my tentative plan right now. So again, we're at 293 days and January 15th is my next visiting point. So for the first about 60 to 90 days, I've been looking at USA Jobs Monday and Friday while growing the business. So our business is called Learn and Live. We do veteran transformation from the prayer room to the boardroom. We just did a 5-day spiritual growth challenge for veterans and patriots to come in. So we did that. We also have our marriage book coming out again. We're republishing that, Leave No Marriage Behind. So we've been focusing on business, but looking at USA Jobs Monday and Friday, because when you're a government employee, the easiest way to leave the government job is to find another government job. So that at least covers the majority. So when January 15th comes up, I'm going to see where I'm at and my wife's at and the job opportunities are at, and also the business. So my wife is looking at becoming a part-time contractual children's director at a church. So that should start in January. So we see what compensation is there, what compensation I have, what benefits and everything else, and then evaluate. If things are sucking wind in January 15th, then most likely I'm looking at getting my oil rig certification and looking out for there. If things are going well, then, and I'm a disabled vet too, so I'm looking at that into the factor too, is the overall compensation. If we're doing well and we're starting to get opportunities, then we'll continue on, but then we'll revisit that every 90 days. So it just depends on where it's at. We got some opportunities for some conferences, workshops, some speaking engagements and whatnot, but we got to see what solidifies by January 15th. So every 90 days, and we're sharing this every day on the retirement journey. So I'll do a big breakout January 15th and say, hey, this is what we're doing and everything else. So, but my main primary goal is to replace roughly the $4,500 a month that I'd be bringing in from the both jobs combined, is to do that. But I'm hoping I don't have to get to the point that I have to go nationwide to search and basically just do whatever. I prefer just to continue to serve our veterans in going over and holistically from the prayer room to the boardroom, because we've done a ton of different jobs before we did this full-time air reserve technician job. So it's an interesting journey. So everything is now trying to work everything lined up. And that CR that we were talking about earlier has been impacting the jobs that are going out there government-wise. So that's been kind of slowing down because I haven't seen really anything on the pike anyways ever since the old POTUS, new POTUS is coming in. So everything's been kind of frozen. That's why January 15th is our reevaluation point.
Yeah, that was a big deal. That CR was a big deal. It was, I think that's a big reason why I just applied and got hired on as a federal worker as well. And it all happened so fast. It was within a month, like from the time I applied to the time I got 2 interviews and then a job offer, all within a month. It was like expedited. I'm in the office now, not now physically, but starting tomorrow. Started actually 2 weeks ago, and it all moved so quick. Everybody was amazed. They're like, how did you get hired on? And everything happened within a month. I'm like, it's got to be the CR, right? I mean, they don't know what the next administration is going to be doing. So might as well get somebody in that job before something happens, and then they freeze, and then, you know, telework goes away, et cetera, remote work, I anticipate is going away. So I mean, that's another conversation we could have, but yeah, everything is kind of frozen right now. I mean, they're like really evaluating what's going to happen.
Yeah, and that's another reason why I am retiring, because I've been in both roles. I've been the government employee and the reservist.
Right.
Is you don't get the freedom to truly do what you want to do. So as a military member, there's a lot of things you can't go and do, but as a federal employee, you can't do the same similar thing. So I've been almost homeless 4 times. We've had food insecurity issues. We've been up to job offers up to $250,000, and I've worked at jobs for $8, $9 an hour. So I've been through all the roller coaster. And the thing of it is that it's the psychological pressure of every administration, every continuous resolution amendment, anything that you wanted to go over and do for our community, you can't say anything. So as you start Monday, if you wanted to lobby for Congress to change something, you can't do that now. Once you quit the job, literally one day, you can go over and do that. We have about 20 to 40 veterans at Luke Air Force Base or more that have food insecurity issues, active, guard, and reserve. We have 44 people that were losing a day, those types of things, veteran homelessness, all these other types of things. So my heart in veteran transformation is to holistically help our community from the prayer room to the boardroom. I've had people that wanted me to be in documentaries and other things. I'm like, I can't do that because it represents X and I have to give a good image on there. So that's the other thing about the transformation, is that you really have to watch where you go and watch what you say. And I don't think that we should be inhibited once we become veteran to go do something, but it's one of those things that you sign the dotted line. I was a government employee or a federal employee that basically says you're going to represent the brand, don't go mess with the brand. But I'm okay in 293 days to mess with the brand. So if you're having struggles in the GS world and it's becomes stupid, I want to be able to go over and go talk and say, I've been there, I've done that, and now my people are struggling in those places. Like I'll give one example. So as a traditional reservist and as a military employee, you can't touch TriCare Reserve at all. So you're paying out of pocket hundreds of thousands of dollars every single month for medical insurance. But you got to stay PT required and got to look like a 9-pack Lego Batman and everything else, depending on your job. One of my coworkers is the same status as I am. She's practicing her PT stuff Monday through Friday. She's technically a federal employee, not a military employee. But we're wearing the uniform, doing everything else. Well, she injures her shoulder during that time. So now she can't get VA compensation for it. She can't really get a medical profile for it. She had struggled to get medical insurance that would cover her for it. And then she had to fork out thousands of dollars to go over and to get this checked out so then she could get a profile. And then she'll never get compensation for it because, oh, well, you weren't entitled 10 status. So you should have just waited until Saturday of the PT test and then busted your shoulder. And then it would have been perfectly aligned and be like VA 80% medical board, everything else. So those things are things I want to go help and to go over and to change and say, hey, if you're making us wear the uniform, either have us as a military soldier or have us as a straight civilian. And we shouldn't get restricted if we are a traditional reservist and TriCare Reserve Select is affordable medical. I should be able to buy into that medical instead of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on medical from third party, because our guard and reserve people don't always get the best insurance depending on the job they do compared to active duty. Active duty is like TriCare Prime. I would love to go back on TriCare Prime. So if anybody wants to call me back up, even for a day, I would be elated. You know how many medical bills I could eliminate?
Prime is legit.
It is. Anybody complains about it, I'm sorry, they don't know the reality. They're in the mix of active duty. Like, oh, this is horrible. I'm like, go try civilian insurance for 12 minutes. I'll just let you for 12
you can get
minutes.
in.
If you can get in,
Just comparing some of the prices when I got out, just for like, giggles, just comparing the prices. And I'm like, there's no way I'm paying, hundreds every month versus what is it? TriCare Prime for retirees, like $67 or something, every month, 700 something a year for the whole family. It's a pretty good deal. Pretty good deal.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic. It's $250 for TriCare Reserve Select when you're an active reservist guardsman. But once you go over and become retired, so in 293 days when I retire, I can still access TriCare Gray Area. Now it's $1,400 and change to go buy in there. And I'm only 43. Yes, I'm 60% to 80% disabled, depending on the VA next claim. But the thing of it is that I can't get my family covered. And that's another thing too. Why is our 100% disabled vet still paying for medical insurance for their family when they could be dying in 5 years? Those 100% P&T people are usually really inhibited. Chapter 35 benefits are a great blessing, and it was a great fight that we did. But the thing of it is that now my partner's having to pay still hundreds of thousands of dollars for the rest of the family go support, and you are only limited on $4,200 to $4,500 a month. Imagine half of your VA disability going to insurance just to take care of your family. And then you still got these nasty thing called copays. I'm like, what? I pay this much and I still got a copay? I'm like, can't you copay it for me?
It's not the way it works.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
So things I want to go over and to help our community with that, even if I can help even get the word out to say, hey, just so you know, this is what the reality that you're walking into, be prepared.
Yeah. So that seems like a heavy lift. I'm curious to know, like, how, I mean, are you going to go, stand in front of Congress and, give your point of view? I mean, what does that look like?
Well, holistically right now, we do that through the podcast and individual consulting. That's the first way we do it.
Yeah.
So we individually give the information to those people, help them walk through the steps. So here's an example of my life. I wish I had somebody help me walk through. So I almost went homeless 4 times. And going through that is nerve-wracking. Imagine if somebody can help me to walk through the process of like how that works, because this is what typically happens. This is how one way to get out of homelessness. You have lack of job, everything else. You call 211.org. Well, 211 gives you tons of resources. VA gives you tons of resources, but then you have to call those resources. And usually those resources are liquidated. It wasn't until I met a military navigator that helped me contact all those resources so then I could get the resources I need to get out of there. So that's the same thing that we try to do with Learn and Live in our transformational coaching, is to help you walk through those steps. And as we grow and as we go, and then we connect with other people, if they need somebody to be that testimonial witness or to go over into lobby, we would love to go over and do that. I had a couple agencies that wanted me to help go lobby on food insecurity, but I was like, hey, I'm still active. I can't touch it. I said, if you want me to be the blue blob and I have that robot voice, I can be in your documentary. But I'm like, that doesn't serve. People usually don't trust the blue blob. Why are they hiding? Why do they have the blue blob? Why does their voice sound robotic? I'm like, because they want to help, but they technically can't. So they have to shade their identity. So I want to be able to be that voice in those places. Is like, hey, the reason why veteran homelessness is so hard is just these resources. I went through 600 resources in those 4 times in 3 separate states. And here's the majority link. It takes so long to contact them. You do so much paperwork to go work through them. And then the majority of them are usually only have money during certain times, and they have certain approval boards at certain times. And you're like, so if you miss the wrong part of the month, it's the 22nd, we're broke, we have nothing until the 5th. I'm getting evicted on the 29th and I'm looking for work and nothing's going for me. Can you at least find me some work? So I went to one for 3 hours and they said, hey, we can give you $75, but we have to be last. I said, I could have worked and earned that $75. Had another agency that said, hey, we can help you, but you have too much money in your checking account. I said, the rent's coming out tomorrow. I'm not even have enough for food. I'm like $2,005 right now, but $1,500 is coming out for rent tomorrow. I will be below your number. Oh, not today. You have to reapply another day. So I burnt 2-3 hours. And because my current check account is $2,005, the transaction is coming out tomorrow. You denied me because of that. So those types of things to go over and to help and to navigate those resources. So I don't want to be a big lobbyist. I'm not going out to do that, but at least if I can be the voice for those people that don't have that voice, and to go over and do that, or to help in those resources or help in those connections to that particular regard. So we do it individually by podcast, message, get out there, individual consulting. And as we grow and go, if we have those opportunities to lobby and to be a voice, then we'll go over and do that.
Yeah, it's excellent. And I just want to kind of put a pin in something that you mentioned as you were talking through your story and through some of the things you were doing, setting up this 90-day kind of goalpost between you and your spouse, and maybe potentially extended family members, mom and dad, sister, brother, etc. But just hitting that every 90 days and doing kind of like a recap of like, okay, here's what we were doing, here's what we expected to happen, here's what the results are right now, what's working, what's not working, what can we cut, what can we add, how can we adjust, and then go on to the next 90 days. Like that right there in and of itself is something we try to let people know, like, get prepared, do your homework, do the things that you need to do before you get to the point where you need to get transition out of the military, or if you have a medical board or something happens along the way. Like if you're setting up that simple goalposts every 90 days, like you could save yourself years of frustration, years and years of frustration, just by doing that kind of basic, we call it an AAR in the Army, but an after action review, but you're basically doing it every 90 days with your significant other, and you're discussing the things and putting everything on the table and leaving the communication lines open and kind of flattening the organization between you and your wife, your husband, whoever it may be. I think that's a super important point that a lot of people may just kind of glaze over because we just talked about it and we're going through it. But if you did that, you could save yourself tons and tons of stress.
No, I 100% agree on that, because one of the things I think we're missing is we come in the military and we get indoctrinated. We have an in-processing checklist and systems and processes. We need to have a veteran in-processing checklist that says, here's the things as becoming a veteran. What is your life to look at? So I actually want to develop that. And I'm thinking to talk to Jenna Carlton, because she usually has the Veterans Journal, helps you start emotionally, psychologically dealing with that stuff. But what about practical in that particular? Because TAPS gives a good boost to it, but they don't really hold you accountable more than like the week that you're there. Hey, you met the check blocks, you look good, blah, 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 everything else. I'm like, but what about reality sitting in? And I know that Army was trying to try to do like a 180-day warrior transition battalion. I'm not sure if it came to fruition, but we need something like that across the DoD. And even if it's our own agency and we build it like a veterans and processing checklist that teaches us how to really be veteran from holistically, I would love to go over and see that, because it's something we do really good at checklists. And if we had a checklist for our lives, and again, curtail it to the individual, but I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. That's something that I think John and I talk about a lot about. Kind of like finding your purpose, navigating your next mission, right? Depending on what your actual circumstances are. Like if you find yourself in a bind for money, what's the next step? What are the resources to get to that next step? So that's something. I mean, we can even talk about it offline if you want, Daniel, and come up with something together. But yeah, very, very good information. I want to kind of transition a little bit into what you do. Like you have the counseling. I went on your LinkedIn. There's talk of family and relationships. Just kind of want to transition into that a little bit, because I know that is a big thing for veterans, especially as they're navigating from the military to civilian chapter of their life. It could really take a big hit on the family life as well, trying to figure out where you're going to go next. Maybe the wife or the husband works and the military service member, maybe they're going to take some time off and just be dependent on that next person, or maybe they want to team up and, double up their money. Whatever the case may be, I want to get your take on relationships, family relationships specifically, going from military to civilian.
Yeah, so I'll give you a story on how I screwed it up and how it's getting better. So when I got out of active duty, I initially wanted to work with churches. I was churches and marriages. The company's name was Perspectives and Reflections. Didn't realize I was making a spa. The name didn't flow. Anyway, that was the old name. So I took my severance when I got out of active duty and tried to really expedite the business. But I didn't take it to the prayer room, obviously praying with God. I really only gave a little bit to my wife, and then she kind of agreed passively just to honor me. And then in the kids were too young in that particular garden when I took this direction. So they didn't have a voice and a view and all that type of stuff. And then in the boardroom, I kept getting denied while I was doing this stuff, but I did that grit like we do in the military and perseverance. Just keep hitting, it'll eventually happen. So I moved our family from Dayton, Ohio to Little Rock, Arkansas, with this nonprofit agency that I was going to try to get into, but they said, hey, you're just getting out of the military. You don't have 200 families. You want to reboot with your wife. You just get on active duty. And I didn't listen to God or anybody. So we Went out there to Little Rock, Arkansas in combat boots, khaki pants, and a button-down shirt, either going in person, on the phone, or on the internet to these churches saying how much their marriage ministry sucks and how much they needed me. I was arrogant a-hole. At a minimum, I was that. How many clients did I get? Goose egg. I got jack squat nothing. I'm like, not only was I trying to service not the ideal client, so I'm looking like a military veteran trying to service churches, so that's like looking wrong. And then being arrogant and pompous and everything else and hoping that these things would go work out. And I actually had like one Easter egg left, and that Easter egg got destroyed. So the company that was interested in me said, hey, we're going to wait a year and then you can repropose.
Right.
That email went away. I'm like, God must have took that email out because I saved everything. I found every email under the sun, thousands of emails. I'm an IT geek by trade. That was one of my AFSCs. I'm like, I know my stuff. And I'm like, I can't find that email for the life of me. So I couldn't even restart the relationship back up. So we almost went homeless. We had 2 suicide attempts in the home at that point. And all these other types of things. So I ruined everything from the prayer room to the boardroom because I was doing it the exact opposite way. I wasn't having God in my relationship. I definitely was barely having my wife in the relationship. My kids were kind of like a passing in the wind. And then I was pushing business like it was my God. And almost everything got destroyed in that regard. And it was God going over and convicting me. It took a couple years after that. It wasn't even that point. I didn't break at that point. So we almost went homeless and all that type of stuff. Job booted back up. Then we moved somewhere else. My coworker shot 12 people, still didn't get a flipping clue. I was really dumb to the point until I was losing another job. Not because of anything I did wrong, it's just the way these jobs go. I had one because of the 12 coworkers getting shot, had another one because of contracts being gone. This one was like, well, they miscounted their PCs. I threatened divorce with my wife on her birthday as I'm getting laid off. It was that night, her spiritually kicking me in the nuts to get me a clue. So it was God through her that saved our marriage. And that's when we started to realize, it took 5 to 8 years later to realize, if you don't manage your life from the prayer room to the boardroom when you're coming out of the service, some things can last for a little bit. But if you don't have that holistic, in order look in your life, you're not going to go thrive through the trials and tribulations of life. Things can still happen. You can go over and have a faith, have a great life with your marriage and everything else, but trials are still going to come. But what brings you that joy and that satisfaction? And that's what we help with the veteran transformation. So the things that I had to transform through with God and through others helping me through this process, we try to share the same thing with them. So that's why we also named our company Learn and Live, because everybody kept saying, like, you just need to live and learn. You just need to live and learn. I'm like, that's asinine. I'm like, why do I need to get shot and then learn not to not get shot? In the military, we teach everything first so you don't get hurt. Mm-hmm. So that's right. Where the name of Learn and Live came out of the business. And that's why we support it the way we do, because we saw, primarily me, my wife was way smarter than I, that when you go backwards, it doesn't go over and last. It's when you go from the most intimate space, which is your prayer room, and then going out and outpouring from that joy to the next joy and to the next joy. And then our marriage got better. Intimacy got better. Everything got better. We became more united. So even though we've gone through other trials since then, mm-hmm. And I know as long as I go follow that, we could go homeless again and we would still have joy. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but at least this particular time, it's like my wife's my ride or die. Before, it was more like, she's going to die with me because the Lord said she had to die with me. It was more the obligation. It wasn't like, I want to be with you. I'm being with you because God's told me to call to commit, but now it's more like, I love you and I like you. So it changes life and changes the paradigm. So that's how we go over and serve them. It's like how we had to go learn how to serve others. It's going through that crucible in a sense. And unfortunately, I put myself on the crucible. I wish I would have just listened. I wish I would have just learned and lived instead of live and learn.
Yeah. And I like that you brought that up too. It was, even in the military, we don't live and learn, right? Like if you're going to go to the pistol range or the rifle range, you need to learn how to shoot a pistol or a rifle before you actually, execute the shooting part. So years ago, before I got married, we went through like marriage counseling to know what we were to expect, right? Communication is big, you have to share in your life, this and that. And not to discount it, I just, there's a lot that went into it. But yeah, it does make sense. You have to learn about what the structure is, and then you get a chance to live it
Mhm.
and continue to to learn. A lot of folks don't think about that part, right? It's a continuous thing. It's
Mhm.
ever evolving. Same as marriage, same as any kind of relationship, friends. If you're constantly saying no to your friends who want to hang
Mhm.
out or whatever, calling on you, at some point in time, they're going to stop calling on you because they can't count on you. It's an ever evolving thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we need to learn it this way. It's the best way to summarize it. Get your doctorate degree in your spouse. Get your bachelor's degree in your kids. Get your associates with your friends. And then your high school GED are the people that are like passing by in your life. Because when you leave the military, if John and Vic were in my unit and they're like, let's say 100 people in the unit, and I knew them too, there probably would be the one or the only two that would stay connected because I left active duty. 30 days later, I gave a phone call back to my unit. They didn't even know who I was. They didn't even recognize who I was. I'm the one that trained them to answer the phone and to triage patients. And they're like, oh, yeah, it's you. How'd you forget in 30 days? The active duty life goes by so quick. And they literally phased me out and didn't even know who I was.
The
And then
mission goes on.
when I needed help, like after that point, like the 30 days I didn't need help, and I was trying to ask a question, connect with somebody else. After that, yeah, nobody. And it's very rare. I probably have maybe trying to think. I have 2 friends from active duty that are friends to this day. That's it. The majority of them just phased out. So I'm anticipating the same thing for my reserve time. I might be connected with the people I'm at Mick and other places. Probably John's my BFF more than people I've been working with for the past 5 years. I mean, we've stayed more connected in conversation than anything. So when you're getting out, say, get your doctorate degree in your spouse and your bachelor's in your kids. Those are the people that are going to stay. You might have some friends that might be in that living room, and I might invest more educational learning time with them because they're worth it. But I'm not going to go put them as a priority as high as my kids and my spouse and also my God, because my God's the one that made me. So I'm never going to be done learning with him. So,
Yeah, I think that's one of the places where I have some of the most hardest work ahead of me to do, even now today, even after being in a marriage, being divorced, being remarried again, like placing my wife, my kids, my immediate family first over other things, because there's certain situations, and I feel like I throw an audible, and it's based on a kind of faith and understanding of the friends and the acquaintances and the people like you, for example, right? I could have very well said, let's reschedule this thing. We don't want to do 2 episodes today because it's a Sunday and I have limited time on Sunday either way. And me and my wife talked about it as well. And it's kind of like, and I didn't say it to her at the time, and I'm probably going to go say it to her afterwards, but it's like, there's certain people that I would probably do that and reschedule for and just push things off a little bit. And you are certainly not one of those people. And I don't say that because you're on the show and I'm trying to
it's all for
put a
ratings. I
spot.
understand. It's okay.
I'm not trying to put a spotlight on you specifically, but
I'm just having fun with you.
the reason behind it is exactly what you said. Like, we met, a few months ago. We've had probably more interactions on the internet back and forth, and phone calls and text messages and stuff like that, than I have with a lot of my friends that I've known for years and years and years. So that kind of commitment that I feel from you towards me is what allows me to say, you know what, in this specific case, like, I'm not willing to reschedule it. I understand it's cutting into my personal time and it's cutting into our family time, but for this specific instance, like, I wouldn't negotiate that. Does that kind of make sense? And that's kind of the way I see it. And I don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing, but that's kind of my being a little bit transparent with you and the audience and everybody else, and trying to explain that and figure out if that makes any sense.
It does. It makes sense that certain people are going to be valued in the living room and some people are going to be valued in the boardroom, and then they're shifting. So it's like, if I have somebody, let's say my son pops in, he's going to be higher on the living room ops than you are if you're both in the same room. But there's going to be times and seasons also teaching your family, like, hey, I got to be sacrificial, but you should be the most sacrificial towards them and sacrificing towards them and investing the most towards them. So they know when you are sacrificial for that person, that might be that living room person or that boardroom person, that they know that you're investing them top notch and they're willing to say, go out there, Tiger, like it does in Spider-Man. In Spider-Man 2, she was all for him going out. Spider-Man 3, he didn't invest in her enough. She became a non-priority. It was like his boardroom became more of a priority. So that's why the relationship with the crap. So you have to always consider Spider-Man number 2, that you put that much sacrifice. So then they're willing to sacrifice for you. So then you can be successful in the other rooms.
How do you prioritize your time with business and your, let's call it, extracurricular activities and your family? For instance, I use my calendar very much so every single day. There's a time for everything in my calendar. Just the way I've worked for many years, I carve out time for my family, just to make sure there's uninterrupted time from this time to this time. Carve out time for podcast prep, for reading. I'm curious to know how you prioritize your time.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. So right now in this season, and it goes based on seasons, I told the kids like Monday evening to Thursday evening, I'm kind of doing business stuff. So I'm at work during the day. If they need time or they have scheduled stuff, they have to give it to me like 2 weeks in advance if they consider it important, because they're teenagers. I call them medium large and extra large. My son's like bigger than me, so he's extra large. So those are the size of my kids, and they're pretty much all close in age. They're all like between like almost 9th graders to high school graduates going into the Navy. Yep, I know he's going to the Navy and I'm Air Force. It's okay. Anyway, so I go over. It's like usually Monday through Thursday evenings. It's usually time specifically either to business or my wife. Then like Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays is more family time. If they want specific family time, hey, you just come to me and that's what you're looking for. If you need to have one of those cheesecake moments and you come in the garage and everything else, it's like, hey, I'm willing to go take that. During podcast time, I specifically tell them like, hey, don't go over and knock on the door. I'm like, if it's urgent, you better be knocking on the door. I'm still teaching some of my kids that because they're autistic, ADHD like me. So they'll sometimes be like, oh, gosh, I went in my head. I should have thought about it. But you gotta do a holistic walk with them. So, but my wife gets the most priority important. Try to do weekly or bi-weekly date nights, looking at the schedule and going over and syncing, going over and figuring out ways to contextualize with family. If you're going to do the doom scroll, you might as well do the doom scroll on how to go over and connect with your marriage and your family, because we all get caught into that doom scroll. Hopefully the people live watching us are not doom scrolling. Stay on, please. No, I'm just saying. But that's what I've gone over and at least done throughout the years. I mean, sometimes you have to build a schedule. Sometimes it's a time block. Sometimes it's a weekly sync. I mean, it depends on the person and how they do it. But for podcasting, let's say me and John weren't friends and he wanted my time and he wanted to book a time outside of my window. I'd still look at him situationally because I know he's in Italy compared to the United States. But typically most of the United States people, I'm like, hey, I podcast on Thursday, I podcast on Saturday. So Vic, if you're in the United States, you're kind of host. If you want my time and I'm going to have to sacrifice your family, Vic's like, I only can do Wednesday. I'm like, Vic, can you afford $100? He's like, I'm not paying $100. All right, then you go back to my calendar. I'm like, the free podcasting opportunities for veterans for me are Thursdays and Saturdays. If they want there, I'm going to at least get compensation so then I can do other things for my family when I do have that free time, because it's valuing my time, valuing your time. I'm like, hey, if I'm giving you 4 free slots a week, any veteran can come on the show, just so you know. This is like a shout out to everybody. If they want to come on Thursdays and Saturdays, fine. But me and John have built enough of a relationship, and I'm like, okay, he's in Europe. I'll do accommodation, but I'm going to double check with my family and double check where my ops is before I go over and randomly schedule with John and everything else. Obviously, if he's more on a regular living room person, then yeah, my family is going to know of John, and then they're going to go over and he becomes part of the family. So that means he's in that extension. But yes, he's not going to John's not going to get trumped for my kids, Now, my kids are outside of the house. Yeah, they're considered boardroom people at that point. You are adults. You get on my calendar too, because one of them's almost on the point of that. I'm like, but I still go on loving them and go over and serving them and everything else. So, but they do have to honor overall that, hey, me and my wife are our priority. Me and God, and me and my wife and God are priority. our church's priority. We're not really doing non-negotiables on that. So that's the types of things. I am like, if me and John were just random casual person, he says like, hey, this is my town. I'm like, well, church is more important to me. The prayer room is most important. Sorry, John, I'm just not going to be on your podcast. I'm like, God's more valuable than to that. So he was gracious to curtail, which was great. But the thing of it is that I think it's just always a priority rank and stacking in that particular regard. So if I appreciate Vic and I put him there, I might make some sacrifice. But if I'm doing that outside of that habitually, regularly for Vic compared to everybody else, and I did that wrong. I did 2 years as a director of TV. I used to manage a digital TV company, and it was a horrible time, and I didn't do it right. So I do fail at it sometimes, but that's a summary of it.
Yeah, and in all of that, I wanted to ask, how do you deal with the disappointment moments, with I call them the human experience moments, because we're all human and we all make mistakes at some point or another point, whether it's directly, indirectly, intentional or not. How do you deal with the failures and the human mistakes that pop up from time to time?
Well, I guess I'll just go into the digital TV portion. I can't get into the specifics, but I'll share my failures into it. So this was about 3-4 years back, trying to grow the brand. I got into digital TV through a company, then found out that company was kind of scammy, to say the least. And then some of the people that were left over from that were going to be left behind. So I went over with me and 4 other people. We formed our own digital TV company. I became like the chief technology officer of the company, founder. 2 full years of pretty much wasted time, money, energy. Was I thankful to help the people? Yeah, but when I looked at it holistically, it was horrible. I wasted 2 years of time, and I was focusing on other people. So I was trying to help other people. Let's pretend Vic's a civilian. I was trying to help people like Vic so then I could have enough money to go help people like John, the veteran. And when I went to a military conference called Project Die Hard, they had Hope Stock. They're actually doing a Hope Stock 2025. That's, come on, blanking on his name, Brian Gibson. So went 3 years ago to go do that. And it's more of a Christian prayer room type thing because they help veterans through suicide and homelessness, but they do it from a Christian lens. We went out there and did some content out there and went out there for 3 days. And we got blessed for a scholarship to go out there. So our whole entire family went out. We gave our testimony about our marriage, and 2 marriages got saved. And that's when it virtually kicked me in the nuts. I'm just going to call it point blank. That's when I knew I was wasting my time for 2 years. That was why am I doing this? Those 2 years didn't really help any veteran, didn't help any responder, didn't help out any marriages. I didn't help out anybody in the prayer room. I might have got a few kudos here and there, but 2 years of time, energy, and everything else. So at the end of that point, I said, hey guys, I'm selling back my equity. I'll sign it NDA, NCNC. So I'm under that until 2027. And those are 2 years of regret and waste in that particular regard. I did learn a lot. I can help a lot of people. I've done this stuff. Vic, if you're on the back and you're doing fantastic on this, because I used to do this stuff, I want to learn stuff from you because there's some things I don't know. But it's like I used to do that stuff all the time. And I was like, how much time did I go over and waste not giving to my family? How much time did I go and waste not giving to my wife? And my wife in wisdom was telling me 6 to 8 months in, she's like, she left because she had a show and then she phased out. And she's like, I think this is a waste. And God gave her the wisdom of that. And I didn't listen for another 16 months. I wish I would have got out when I did. So that is one of those moments I'm like, I'm thankful that God still gave grace in that time. I'm thankful that my wife still went over and stayed. I'm thankful that my kids still go over and love me. And I'm thankful for the people I helped. But holistically, I'm like, if I could took those 2 years, but I will use that trial as a testimony. So that's the way I look at it. We can take our wounds and use it for wisdom. We can take our pain and look for it in purpose. So even all the things and mistakes and the human moments I have, either through omission or commission, I'm just going to say that, hey, allow the Lord to use it for triumph, and I will use it for wisdom. And then I at least able to use it for connection more than anything else. So I would say those things in that particular regard. But that was my biggest one, at least recently.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I feel like that's one of the ways. And again, if people want to know more, they can reach out to you if you're doing these kind of workshops, like you just completed one not too long ago, and want to go through one of those workshops and kind of gain some skills. But I feel like it's all just gathering tools to be able to better equip yourself to handle situations, to be able to build better. You need better tools and more useful tools and tools for the task so that you can build better things, whether that's your relationships, your lifestyle, your career, like whatever it happens to be. I want to look at the end of the retirement time. And I know you said you were going from this dual hat kind of status. And for those of you who are not in the Air Force, it would be called a mil tech, I guess it would be from the Army perspective. I think in the Marines
Yeah.
it's the same. And then the Guard and Reserve, or the Guard specifically, is the same kind of mil tech where they do the dual hat like GS9 and military uniform.
Yeah.
I mean, there's ways to get through that, and there's ways to transition from that, and not necessarily going directly to a DAC position, which is a full-on GS employee, not connected to a military Title 32 kind of reserve thing.
Mhm.
But have you looked at anything like NAF positions, like non-appropriated funds positions, which, by the way, are not really affected by continuing resolution, or at least not as much as a government civilian position is? Do you think it's going to be going down the path of a regular civilian job with a regular civilian company? Do you think you're going to get to the point, like, do you have a goal set in place to try to put your company first and get that rolling and get that going? And then if that kind of fails, and then take
Yeah.
path B, path C.
So again, for the first 90 days, it's been basically continuing to work in your job because you still got to be plugged in. This is the weird part. You're at retirement, but you're having to be plugged in. It's kind of like that double matrix. It's like, I still have to be good enough, but if I'm too good, like I did in active duty, worked until the last day, I almost destroyed myself. So it's learning how to systematically start letting it go. Like, I'm not going to jump in any major projects and refinements and those types of things. I've already told my coworker, I'm knowledge transferring right now. If you're a year out, my recommendation is you start knowledge transferring. You're there for the wisdom. And as you get closer, it's giving your work center a heads up, like, I'm phasing out. So I need you to phase in, or the next person. You're still doing what needs to be required, but I'm not going to be like, hey, I'm going to go volunteer for this. I'm not going to this project. Hey, they send this email. I'm not going to get into these studies and performances and all these other extra fluff. I'm starting to phase myself out, but I'm also ratcheting myself up. So right now, again, it's only been Monday and Friday looking at USA jobs. I could look at NAF. So if you guys can send me that resource, that'd be great, because I've heard a lot of NAF jobs. I'm not familiar with the NAF world, but I know they can transfer that type of thing. But the January 15th is saying my goal for at least from here until like 180, as much as possible, is I'm trying to invest as much into our business, and then I'll apply for them as like side hustle jobs, like if something comes up. And if we get to the point of April 15th and there's like no line in sight, I will, looking at the oil rig, looking at local jobs, remote jobs, travel jobs. If it's like July 15th, I'm applying for like everything and anything under the sun and whatnot. But it also depends on our fiscal footprint. So I'm still going through a review board for my disability. I'm still going through, I'm able to hopefully, when you're, just so you know, if you're a disabled vet and you are a mil tech, you can collect, but it's like dual compensation. So they kind of take it back. So I'm working on a financial waiver so I can get that money back. I've been paying back for years because I've been a disabled vet for years. So I'm working on getting that money back. I'm taking any raises and bonuses and going over and putting that towards debt so I can minimize my debt. So when I get out, I have the least amount of things as possible in that particular regard, and continue to work with that. And any business money that comes in, I'm utilizing that to then go over into pay off debt, or any income that I can go eliminate. I'm like, hey, if I don't need this expenditure, I will eliminate that expenditure. Like, I didn't upgrade to the newest StreamYard, like for the $89.99. I'm like, nope, that's not worth it. I'm not upgrading. So I'm at least saving myself $40 a month. So then I'm taking that money that I'm saving to go over and to pummel some other things to do that. And then if I have to, I'll dip in my old bag of tricks, but it gets kind of aggressive if I have to. And I hope I don't, because when I got out of active duty and I knew I needed a job, I was applying for 2 to 20 jobs a day. I was doing side hustle things. I'll do whatever, as long as it's legal and moral. I'm not going to go sell my soul, but I'll do what I need to do to take care of the family. So the blessing is that at least my wife will have a contractual job with the church, which is a blessing. So we'll see on how much will that serve and pay. And also any other things that come up, like speaking engagements, teaching, and everything else. So the goal is to be full-time doing speaking, teaching, content creation, and then uplifting you all as a brand, like military and everything else. So because our brand is to uplift you guys. So if you guys are doing thrivingly well, then we're doing our mission. Because there's usually a person that doesn't go over and serve a community and then fails epically. Like, hey, I went over and I served this community, and they're like, oh, well, I never got a single penny. I'm like, if you're serving them all well, then they're going to uplift you too. So that's what we hope to go over and do and continue to do that. So, and we've started to see some progress just in the past couple of interviews. A couple companies might want us to do their podcasting because they don't have time. So that'd be something that I'm hoping that works out, because I've done a ton of this stuff. So this is like easy breezy for me and very fun to be the guest. The host is a lot more harder work. So Vic, John, you have a lot of work behind you, and I appreciate it. So I would say that is
it's all good fun. It's all good fun. We really enjoy it. This is, I've told John in the past, this is like one of my favorite times of the week, you know, aside from family time and all that. I time to kind of let your hair down a little bit if I stop losing my hair, and just kind of talk, you know, with fellow veterans about veteran issues and things that are going on in the community. Daniel, I'm glad you brought up the veteran homelessness earlier. That's something that's big on my radar. I literally just yesterday, I saw one of the senators here for my district. He put up something about veteran homelessness. I'm like, hey, look, I'd like to sit down with you and talk to you about it, because I'm very involved in the veteran community. I haven't heard anything back yet, so we'll see how that goes. But I do try to do some volunteer here, and I know that here in Southern California, where I am, there's just a ton of veteran homelessness, and I just don't know. And maybe you can give me some ideas here on how to mitigate that. How do we get veterans off the street? How do we get them into jobs, into homes? You know, it's heartbreaking when I'm driving down and you just see Tent City, right, driving downtown. I've gone to baseball games with my kids, and I parked there, and I had to walk around these guys that are wearing like veteran hats, and I'm like, shit, man, I wish I could do more for you, man. You know, I really do. But I just need ideas. See, I'm reaching out, seeing if you can maybe fill my bag of ideas with something new.
I know, at least in Washington, when I was in there and I was getting homeless at that point, is that the number one thing that we need to do in the veteran homelessness or in the homeless in general is we need to raise more money and give more time, because this is what happened. So I'll walk you through the process of what happened to me. So the first time I almost went homelessness, it was God's providence. VA check came in, then a job. But on the second one to the third one, I was literally one day away. And this is what happens, is that a lot of these agencies, they don't accept males most of the time. A lot of these homeless agencies, they accept usually females and females with kids. And then if they're family, it's even harder. I only found one agency in Arizona that actually accepted total family. But they expect you just to get a job super quick within like a short amount of time. And then they only give you so many days. I think the first process is that we initially have to be less is more as the agency, because would you rather help me for 60 days and then like recidivism, get back to homeless again, 90, 120, whatever, how many days? Or am I going to go get out there? The second thing that I observed is that the zoning of things, I would say, especially, I don't know much about California, but this is only what I hear, is that there's a lot of zoning issues. They don't want certain houses and everything else, and then the land and whatnot. I'm like, at least in Washington, they started zoning land for tiny homes. So you can build homes for like $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, container homes, all these types of things. And then they could have sectioned those things out so you can maximize at least helping people in that regard. But we really need to start it right from when the soldier's actually really getting out. Not just taps, not just those types of things, but truly relational connection on helping that people to go over and to thrive, not just getting it off a checkbox and everything else.
Mhm.
Because if you don't really help them walk through the process and you're not walking the journey with them, they can run into a hiccup later on. And if they don't have those resources later on, then they don't trust. If a veteran gets burned once or twice, doesn't matter what type of agency it is, you'll cut off the agency in itself. I've seen people cut off churches, nonprofits, businesses, different relationships have gotten hurt. I've even seen at the point like someone walks into a restaurant, they have a bad scene in a restaurant, that person can have a bad day, and they'll cut off the restaurant for the rest of their lives. So for us as veterans, we really need to serve them holistically. As an individual, serving the help veterans in that particular regard, just know your six. Know those people that are around you that you can help. You're only gonna be able to help so many people that are in that community. If me, John, and Vic are in a triad and we're checking on each other, and let's say Vic has another 3 people and John has another 3 people, if we actually checked on our 6 in a sense, like from the get-go, and didn't just say, hey, leave Daniel Faust behind because he's leaving on the military, and totally forget about him, then that's what happens. We phase back in and we're forgotten. Then we lose purpose and belongingness. And then if we run into a couple bad trials, homelessness can go over and happen. That's what I would say in that particular. And it's the female veterans that are struggling the most, at least in the numbers that I've heard recently. They're becoming exponentially even harder. And so we definitely need to check on our female vets. So it shouldn't just be like, hey, because we're male vets, we have our male 6 people or a triad. We need to have both holistically, both sides, because it can happen. A lot of these agencies will tell you, hey, you only can have 1 or 2 bad times in your entire life. Okay, I get out at 35 and I might live to 85. And I had this with the Department of American Veterans. Great agency helping out, getting your VA benefits and everything else. And they do have some homeless agency stuff, but I got help with gas from them. And then 4 years later, I ran into something again. And they said, well, 4 years ago, you got a $60 gas voucher to help with your gas. So we can't help you if anything gets out. I'm like, what? I'm like, because of that, I'm like, I still love you guys. I love all the agencies, but the bureaucracy of the agency made no sense to me. I got help 4 years ago. And now you're saying because I ran into this issue again, I'm like, literally, it's my job just dissolved and went away. I'm like, I've been hunting for work and I can validate. I'm not trying to brag or boast, but I apply for more jobs. My son hates me because I made him apply for so many jobs because when he became 16, 17 and everything else. And I'm like, he's like 2 jobs a day, 20 jobs to look. I'm like, yeah, because you really want to put yourself in the pool. You're competing against 2,500 people per application. You can't just go apply for 2 to 3 jobs a week like unemployment tells you to do. Unemployment is like, what? When I came in that day, they're like, have you applied for 3 jobs this week? I said, I applied for 3 jobs in the lobby. I'm like, I don't sit there and wait. And I'm like, so, I think it's that type of thing is that we have to know our 6, go over and help. And it has to be a community thing. And you have to know how much you do. You can't beat yourself up if you see there, because I've been there 4 times. I still have that hurt and pain to go and do that. But just trying to check. And if it's you're trying to minister to a veteran that has been hurt and they're in the tent city, I'd make sure to do it safely, do it with a second buddy, and then go over and really love on them and be consistent. It's better to be consistent in a few and help out those few. And then later on, maybe we can figure out to lobby things and do things better for the rest. But even if we can help out with those make a difference. I mean, Tony Robbins got helped by one guy and he got mentored, and now he's opened up 80 companies and has done amazing things for the world of philanthropy. Even Mr. Beast, non-Christian guy, he does a lot of amazing things. Who invested into him? Now who he's investing into others, one of the biggest YouTubers. I think of it as that. It's like, I only can do so much. I do what I can in my span and my scope and love on them where I can. And if I can go do things on a bigger scope and I get those connections with the senator or whatever, let's go talk. But don't beat yourself up just because you can't help out everybody, because then if you gave all your money away, you become homeless and then you're ineffective and unproductive.
Yeah. I mean, that many times I'm wishing, especially with like the last Mega Millions happened, that I won the lottery. If I did, and I talked to my wife a lot about this, like, hey, if you won the lottery, what would you do? And she asked me that at one point. I'm like, I would reestablish the veterans home up in Los Angeles and another one here in closer to where I am. It used to be open back in like the 1950s to welcome back, veterans coming back from the war, or maybe like earlier than that. And it just went to shambles, got demolished. They have other things being built there. I'm like, that would have been great because they had doctors, they had like, it was a community feeling, right? Like not a compound, but it was like almost a subdivision of just veterans. I was like, I would love to open up something like that, but I got to win the
Well, you
lottery
don't have to
first.
wait for that. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Here's an example of Elizabeth Dole saying this. Well, was it Elizabeth Dole? It was somebody. I'm not going to get too political, but there was somebody
Mhm.
political that went over and said, I can eliminate veteran homelessness by half once I get elected president. Don't go over and wait until you have the money. Do what you can and what you got. So if you give that idea and you draw that out on paper and everything else, and you come to Mick, like me and John talked, and we had ideas and everything else, let's see if we can have the community go over and bring that community that worthwhile, because you can bring that to local people or like to a Venmo. I mean, not a Venmo, crowdfunding campaign or investments and whatnot. If it's something you're really passionate going over and doing, you don't have to go and wait. I'm like, people open up churches with no money, and God brings the provisions. We can do the same thing with the ideas and blessings that we have, and then we just do what we can until we get those resources where we got. And sometimes you find out there's a lot of money that people want to go use in grants and other things. If you're doing those great things, grants.gov might be a good place to go start. Check there. Grants.gov does a lot of things like, hey, if you're doing this nonprofit or whatever, we'll give you X amount of money as long as you're willing to fit into the rules and confines of it, or you just raise the money and go over and do it. Because if it's a great idea and God wants to bless it, it will come. We don't have to wait until the $1 billion thing, because we can do amazing things with people more than money any day.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I fully believe that. No, great insight, man.
Yeah, and I think also the thing to take away from that is like the timeline that you set for yourself, for your goals, for life in general, and the timeline that nature imposes on you as well. Like our timelines as humans have started to shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink, and it's because we have technology and we have AI and we've got all these wonderful things that make our lives great and grand, and we can get on highways in certain states and go 90 miles an hour, and over here you can go 100 and whatever you want to do depending on what country you're in. But our timeline perspective is really, really like gotten shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And we see that in our offspring and our kids, right? They want things now and they want it immediately, and they want the gratification now. And you got to kind of like take the one marshmallow and wait for the second marshmallow instead of taking both the marshmallow test kind of thing. So just taking that timeline perspective and stretching it out a little bit, and like you said, like do what you can now, compound it if it's making sense, adjust as you need to do, compound it again, and keep going, and eventually it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, that's this kind of forum, this kind of thing, as you well know, it's a 10-year endeavor that creates an overnight success, right? It's going to be 10 years before we get to the point where this looks like an overnight success, where somebody from like, Good Morning America is calling us up to come on their show to come talk about what we've been doing and how successful it's been. But it's taken us 10 or 15 or 20 years to get to that point. Just looking to the future, right? So it's timeline perspective is a huge factor in that.
Yeah. That reminds me of this one quote I heard. I think it was Teddy Roosevelt. Do what you can with what you have where you are. Have you heard that one?
Yep.
Based on what you said, Daniel, that just rings true. We may not have all the resources, but there's ways of getting around that, networking, getting to know people outside of your immediate circle, similar to what you all did at the MIC, Military Influencers Conference, which I still have plans on going next year. I just had some issues going this past year. However, yeah, that's
you definitely want to register. So they should be coming out with tickets in the next couple of days.
Oh heck yeah, yeah! This past year we had to take my kid over to a Naval Academy meetup. So I'm like, dates just conflicted. So I text John. I'm like, yeah, I can't make it, man. But yeah, no, do you know where it's going to be this next year?
Atlanta, same hotel and everything else. So
Oh, right on.
if
Easy.
anybody's
Okay.
coming out to the MIC, it's September 21st to the 24th. If you need any information, get back with me. John knows information. Vic's potentially going this year. We'll have to drag him. Get over here. And then, so it is out in the heart of Atlanta. It's at the Hilton in Atlanta. If you're going to come in and fly in, I would just recommend staying at the hotel. Don't park your car. The car, it's expensive. It's like $60 a day to park your car. John was a baller. That's why he did that. But anyway, I wouldn't have paid $60 a day. I was blessed to get the rides back. But this time around, I'm staying in the hotel and everything else. And then I'll just Uber locally and everything else. And there's a lot of people you connect with. It was amazing. I connected with John. John's like, I got back to me. He's like, hey, do you want to ride home? I'm like, yeah, I don't have to take an Uber. This is a blessing. I'm in. And so that was really cool. So that's how me and John connected more. But yeah, September 21st to the 24th. I think it's Sunday through Wednesday this time in that particular regard. And if it's your first time going, unless you really want to go to the gala, just grab a basic ticket. I'm not trying to downcast VIP and anything else. You're just going to be so overwhelmed. You won't know how to leverage the VIP ticket because there's so many things to do just on the basic ticket. And if you have a low budget and you're starting a business new, I would just go recommend getting the basic ticket. Now, if you've been there a couple of years and you're like, hey, I know how to leverage it, and I want to leverage the power of these things, hey, go all the power to you. But you can get so overwhelmed in there, and you just make yourself a few goals. I would say 3 is the max, and then focus on those goals. And I met most of them. I met like 2 out of the 3 goals. I got enough podcasts. I think I got a decent amount of sales on the book. And then the only thing was clients. I'm still closing out clients, so I don't know that goal being met yet. So we're still working on stuff. That takes a while, especially in the September season. If you're expecting clients instantaneously, that's a blessing, but usually they'll follow up. It's usually about a 2 to 4 month follow-up around. Yeah. Some of the clients I've started out in September, now they're coming around like, oh, it's January again. Now I'm serious about business. And I'm like, okay, I kind of expected that. I love you. We'll follow up in the new year.
So Daniel, I do have a question regarding your coaching, the Learn and Live. Is there a website, or how do people get on that?
So they can go over, there's a 20-minute free session that they can get. Any military veteran, first responder gets a 20-minute free session first time. They can just go on the website, check out the basic details, figure out their room, and then all our social media is attached. You also can do like there's a form on the website that you can go do that. But the easiest way to do it is just DM me. Just find Daniel Faust on Facebook. Send me a direct message. I'm ADHD and autistic, so I'm going to see it always. I mean, I look at my messenger at least like 5 to 10 times a day. You send me a message, I'll send you a booking link. Then we'll go over and do a 20-minute free session, see where you're at. Actually, any veteran that interviews on my podcast, I give them like a free session. So if you want me to uplift your brand and you want a free session at the same time, we usually do that during the after show. So we'll uplift your brand during the podcast, and then I'll just give you a free consultation. So that's a way to do too. You can go to Linktree/War Hero to Superhero. That's actually the best way to find everything of Learn and Live, is just go to Linktree/War Hero to Superhero. We put everything there. So that's from our website to our social, to what things we're promoting, what books we got, if we have like a challenge that we're doing, all that stuff is out there. So Linktree/War Hero to Superhero. That's where you can find us. It's a one-stop shop. Plus, it's free. So if you're a veteran that's an entrepreneur and you're needing to get a one-stop shop for your sites, do that. And then you just connect yourself a QR code. That's why John went on my podcast. I told him, you want to go on my podcast? Here's a QR code. He scanned it, and that's how he booked it. So, and then he was able to see everything else. So
nice. I'm curious about that. Leave no milspouse behind. I'm looking at your Linktree right now. What is that about?
Leave no milspouse behind was like about my wife and 5 or 6 other milspouses that were talking about how their transformation, how they dealt with it. Some of them went through divorce. Some of them have gone through like moving. Some of them gone through like how do they go over and simulate this community. There was one woman that was active duty, but she was still a milspouse, and then she was learning how to simulate that. They were talking about how to stay together more than separating apart, because the milspouse world can be very joint, but sometimes very divisive. And they were talking about the pros and the cons of that. So that book was published with my wife and 5 other milspouses. And that's how that went over and started. So Michelle is the main runner of that book. right now. We haven't focused on that for a while, just because the mill spouses have several other things they've been working through. So, and whatnot, but that was at least collab books in that particular regard. And that's one of the other things that we do with veterans is if they want to write their book, we do that too. We can help them write their books. It's so easy. Don't go over and wait, because you're going to write a story. You're going to write a story, and guess what it's going to be if you don't write your book? It's going to be your obituary. Someone else is going to write it for you. So you might as well write your story today. And so it's in the future and legacy of tomorrow compared to the one that's left. And your obituary is a couple lines. At least you can get your true essence while you're still here. And so, because your memoirs and your story is important.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I love that whole mill spouse thing. I know that's a heavy burden on, especially, like just seeing how my wife transitioned as we PCS'd everywhere, having to switch careers every time. It's a heavy lift. I'm gonna definitely look into that one. But yeah, that's great. I'm still looking at your link tree right now. 5-day spiritual growth challenge. So you actually run these things, these challenges. You do them all online, or do you ever do like physical meetups?
Once we get big enough, and if we need to do a physical meetup, but we live in Dover, Delaware, nobody's really here, so we
all the way up there.
Yeah. It's basically you drive into Delaware until it's almost dead, and then you'll see a base, and that's Dover, Delaware. So it's Rhode Island is the smallest state. That's where I'm from. Delaware is the second smallest state. So you literally could pass us like in an hour. So we've just come to find out that we just do it holistically online so we can maximize our reach. But as we grow, our goal is to do marriage conferences and retreats. We want to do spiritual, like evangelistic events. So a good portion of our proceeds as we earn that is to do free evangelistic events also. So with the 5-day spiritual growth challenge, if people come in and then they do it, that's free. And if they come in as a coaching client and everything else, a good portion of those proceeds will go towards doing evangelistic events and everything else. So everything that we do is to go over and to uplift. Like obviously we're a for-profit company, but the thing of it is that we still continue to go over and to give back. So we want to go over and help people holistically from the prayer room to the boardroom. So if it grows and it's fruitful and we know it's investable, then we will do in-person things. We will come to you as long as we can go over and afford to do those events to you. We would love to do a holistic tour, go nationwide, and to do those types of things. So as we have it, then we'll do it. But the world is a very interesting place to market. That could be a whole podcast in itself. How do you go market your military brand to military people? That's one I'm still learning myself.
It is an uphill battle, man. It can be.
Yeah, we're still trying to figure that one out.
Win the lotto, then we can figure it out.
Right. I'm waiting on
Vic.
Vic.
Man.
He's the one with the magic numbers over there.
I'm working on it.
Well, you're in California. You actually have the most chance from the lottery perspective. California is one of the biggest winners. So maybe we should send all our money to you. Here's our money for tickets.
That's fine. I'll buy a bunch of tickets if you guys want. That's fine with me.
Whole roll of scratchers. Yeah, so just to be respectful of your time, I see we're coming up on about an hour and a half, and I actually literally only had one other question. You mentioned oil rig, and I'm just super curious about why oil rig.
I have some friends that are in that industry. It's not something I want to enjoy, but it's the one that I know that will help us maximize our reach, because the interesting part about the oil rig is once you get hired, you get paid really exceedingly well. It's about $900 to $1,000 a day for the specific job I'd be applying for once I got my certification. So you can do 14 days on, 14 days off. So it gives me enough revenue to go over and still do the work. And then I would just consolidate, because you don't have to tell your audience. I'm sharing to the audience, like, would I have more available time? Yeah, but I block my time to make it important for the people they're at. And secondarily, it's also sort of a scarcity thing. Because if I offered every day, I used to do that on my podcast. I used to give every day for interviews, Monday through Friday, 2-hour blocks. God, then you would destroy your life if you gave that max amount of availability. So I decided I'm going to time block, and now people think it's more precious. So I would leverage the oil rig and say, okay, during these 2 weeks, this is where my time is, so I can leverage. It's kind of weird in scarcity. The less time you have, the more they want you. And it's a legit scarcity. If I'm going to the oil rig, I'm like, hey, 2 weeks out of the month, I'm not being available. I'm like, I can't be on the oil rig saving people's lives and going over and podcasting. So it would give me the power to continue the business, because roughly it'd be about 14K gross, 8K net after expenses. So that gives me enough to continue to power through that, just like we're all doing jobs in some capacity. You know, if the business is full throttle, then that's fine. My business is a cheap date right now. If I have 4 to 5K a month coming in, my date has been met. I mean, it's not that much. So, I mean, but that gives me the power to go over and do that if I have to go towards that route. Because all the other jobs that I'm skilled at, they don't pay enough anymore. So I'm like, I have to build the skill from what I have, like helping people in podcasting. That's a valuable skill, but you can't go to a job and say, hey, I help you build your podcast. They're like, no, you can do our podcast for 15 an hour. What? No, I can't afford to live on 15 an hour.
No.
I mean, so.
Yeah, that oil rig gig, man. So I have some family members that do that, and it's a long day. It's a very dangerous job. So just be careful with that if you do that. Yeah, my brother-in-law does it, and he lost his thumb at some point.
Well, the job I'd be applying for is a safety coach. So I'm the person trying to preventing the thumb and preventing those types of things.
There you go.
So my job is to go over and like, hey, make sure you have your gloves on, do those types of things. So if I get hurt as a safety coach, do I document myself? Hand missing.
Yeah, you might want to put your resignation papers in at that point. Like I can no longer do this.
As I'm typing with this other hand. Safety issue, hand missing, person,
learn
self.
how to type with your toes. That's good, man. Well, no, that's all the power to you, man, when it comes to that and finding your next mission too. I know that's huge, whether it be oil rigs or whether it be this business here. Hopefully it continues to flourish and become something more than you ever expected.
That is the goal. And that everything I'm doing is to get it to that is the goal. So these are almost like side hustles to get that as the goal. So I already know my mission from now until death. Obviously it will expand, but until the flourishing of the revenue comes in, those are the things that will be the in between if I need to. And I'm praying that I don't have to, but the Lord is good no matter if I have to or not, and he will use it for his glory. So that's the way I look at it, is like every job I did, from delivering flowers to going over and working at a Christian bookstore and even delivering pizza, God used it. Kind of weird. I have crazier stories, but we could go forever.
No, man, it's all good. I appreciate you taking the time. I know it's always a big ask because we go pretty long. Your podcast is a considerably shorter time frame, and it's a lot more structured. So I appreciate you coming out here, taking the time. I hope the audience members, people watching from both of our streams, have taken something away from this, gotten a little bit more insight into you, what you do, how you do it, and kind of what your mission is going forward, and what you're looking to do going forward towards veteran communities, first responders, and helping people get their priorities in order, I would say.
Yeah, thank you much, and very much appreciative of the time.
All right. Thanks, man.
All right. And that is the pod.
That's it. We will see you all in the new year. This is the last one of the year. So see you in 2025. Hope you have a blessed New Year's. I hope you had a good holiday. I hope everybody's safe. And thank you for watching, listening, and paying attention.
And also, don't forget to join the military retirement group on Facebook. I keep pushing for it, John, and it's growing, and it's a great community. And I want to see everybody get some help. Yeah, you people put their information in there. They put their problems in there, issues that they're going through from military to civilian, and somebody answers. Somebody has either been through it or knows how to get through that. So the military retirement group on Facebook, an excellent resource.
That's right. That is absolutely right. All right, everybody. Happy 2024 into 25.